Hey, Roderick. Hey, George.
Hey.
How's your hat? How you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
Good. Thanks, Roderick. So I'm gonna give people some time to join, and then we'll get going. I can't wait to catch up with you.
Yeah, I know. COVID like stopped
Okay,
every
shut everything down.
like visits and hanging out and trips and everything. So
I know.
I got my eyebrows done. I didn't get a chance to get a haircut though, so that's why I
So
got
I was like, I'm getting a haircut. You got all these followers. I
a
was.
haircut.
But yeah, so I generally give people a few minutes and then we get in. I know people are super excited to hear what you got to share with us. I have tons of friends who read your book. And so it's good to actually hear some things from your voice
Yeah.
outside of the book. And so it's really good. So, yes. First of all, I got my copy right here. You see that? Like, but yes. So if you are watching and you have not gotten a copy of George's book, All Boys Aren't Blue, make sure you do that. You can get it on Amazon. That's where I got mine.
It's available everywhere. We try and tell people to support the indie bookstores though, because Amazon is a beast.
It is a beat. So if you have any recommendations, please share them.
Was it Mahogany Bookstore? I think
Oh yeah, no,
that's
I
in
know
DC.
Mahogany.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I always tell people like if you're in that area, Mahogany Bookstore
Okay.
is definitely one. The Strand, I think the Strand is the largest independent bookstore that employs the most. Yeah, the most has the most employees of any independent bookstore. So
Mm-hmm.
the Strand Bookstore too. So
All right. So now we have, a few people going. I'll just give our, little Whitman-Walker information first, and then we can get into the conversation. So I do want to point out that during the last few months, Whitman-Walker's community health team has expanded its outreach efforts, which is why we're here on social media. So we cover various topics about HIV, STI, sexual health practices, access to care, social determinants of health, and general public health interventions. So our current series of outreach sessions, we focus on COVID-19 and ways that you can manage your sexual, personal, and mental health during this time. So I just want to let everybody know that the Whitman-Walker community is here to help and educate and support you. So I do want to thank everybody for joining us. I want everybody also to remember to keep that 6 feet of physical distance away from each other. Wash your hands for at least 20 seconds and, stay at home as much as you can. So I am David Wilson. My pronouns are he, him, him, his. I'm like, what am I? She today? And I am a social media outreach influencer for Whitman-Walker Health. And so, one last disclaimer before we get started, because, George got his views and we have ours, but we want George to be free to, express himself within his views. So, the views and opinions expressed by our guest speakers are not of Whitman-Walker. They do not necessarily reflect our official policies, beliefs, stances, or position. Any commentary provided by our guest speaker are of their opinion and not intended to malign anyone or anything on basis of race, color, religion, sex, marital status, sexual orientation, gender identity, or expression, English language proficiency or national origin, age, disability, bachelor status, or any status protected by law. So, after I said all that, I want to again thank George M. Johnson, author of All Boys Aren't Blue, for being here, which is an Amazon Best Book of the Year. So congrats, George. And George, please feel free to introduce yourself now.
yeah, so I'm George M. Johnson. I guess I was a journalist because I don't do too much op-ed writing anymore, but a journalist. I do a lot of activism work around HIV specifically, as
Okay,
well
excellent.
as around LGBTQ issues and black issues just overall. Right, soon to be New York Times bestseller. That would be nice. The book is an indie bestseller, so I guess I can also say I'm the indie bestselling author of All
That's
Boys Are
good.
Blue, which is my young adult debut memoir. The book has also been optioned for television by Gabrielle Union, and so I'm currently working on moving into TV and film and adapting my life story for television. And I have a lot of other things that are going on that we just can't talk about yet, but some
So,
more
but
stuff
that's all
coming soon.
good.
Yeah, so some more stuff coming soon about the book and about some other projects that I'm working on. So yeah.
Yes, I'm so proud. So thanks again for being here. Obviously, we're excited to learn more about you, your book, and to find out more about or as much as you can share about what's going on with you. But especially during this pandemic, a lot of us are, in our homes. And so it is important to stay connected via social media as much as we can. So I'm happy that, we're unable to be with each other physically, but we are here today. And so I just want to know, George, like, how are you staying healthy during the pandemic? What are you doing mentally, physically, and beyond? Like, what are you doing to keep yourself healthy?
Yeah, well, I guess the unhealthy thing I do is drink too much wine. But it helps me to write, and I always say that I
Yeah.
write like that. I like to write tipsy, but edit sober. So because I'm working on the next book, I drink wine like every day while I'm writing. But then when I wake up in the morning, I do all my editing because if I got too tipsy, then my writing may have got. So I guess that's the one unhealthy thing that I do. The healthy things that I do though, up here the curve flattened maybe about 2 months ago. And so they allowed our gym to open back up in the building as long as you wear a mask. So I try to go to the gym every other day.
That's good.
Another thing that I did was I set up an altar in my house, which is an altar is just a way that you kind of like, it's like a place that you set up to your ancestors. So like
Oh, really?
pictures of my grandmother who recently passed in December. It has my grandfather, my great grandmother Lula Mae, my grandmother Mildred, and it's set up with like their favorite scents and some of like their favorite things. And it's just like a place that you can go to kind of like pray to and to talk to. So I do that regularly now to kind of center myself and balance myself. Every Sunday I sage my apartment and I cleanse like the apartment and sage the apartment.
You said every Friday?
Sunday.
Every
So
Sunday. I was gonna say
every
okay. Well,
Sunday before I go into my Monday, I sage the apartment to try and like give myself. And I usually do it between 11:45 at night and midnight. I sage like right before I go to bed on Sunday nights. So that's kind of been the other thing. I think the other thing though is like at the beginning of COVID, like I stayed away. Like I just stayed away from everybody. I stayed at home, like really, really social distance. I think that at this point though, we've kind of like figured out what the new normal is and how to move and navigate around people. And so I do go home, which is like maybe 35 minutes from where I live at now, to see my family, but we mainly just have outdoor events so that we're still like pretty protected from contracting. It seems like when you're outdoors, it's much harder to contract. So yeah, those are the things that I do, like, trying to stay engaged, a lot more FaceTiming. I think
FaceTime is the key, it really is. Zoom birthdays,
Zoom birthday, like all of those things I've done. And recently I have started traveling again, not like travel like to hang out, but like I have meetings and I have certain things that I have to do. So that's, it's been pretty safe, but yeah.
Yeah. No, that's good. So I'm happy to hear you are taking good care of yourself. I agree with you on the wine situation. I am not writing a book or any scripts or any of that, but I write proposals and I drink when I write them. And then you're right, like you review it after and it works. Like it works for me. So I totally feel that method. But most importantly, everybody's here to like learn more about your book. Like, so tell us about your book and what inspired it.
Yeah. So the book again is called All Boys Aren't Blue. It is a young adult, my young adult a memoir about growing up Black and queer from birth until age 21. I grew up in a small city called Plainfield, New Jersey, which I live in Newark now, so that's about like 30 minutes from here, driving and on the train. What inspired the book, though, was there were like, we had like a lot of things going on, it seemed like, within like Black queer community, especially around Black queer boys. You had like the Giovanni Melton situation where his father killed him, and and the quote that's out there is like his father said, "I would rather have a dead son than a gay son."
Yeah.
And I believe that happened in November of 2017, and so that was one of the catalysts. Also, I had been writing my story in bits and pieces for years, like through articles. Like I was always putting my story out there, like 800 words, 1,000 words, 800 words, 1,000 words. And I kind of got to this place where I was like, if like I can't keep writing about my story in bits and pieces. Like it was kind of like time to put the whole story together. What I also say is that there were two other authors who I really, really respect who had these amazing memoirs that they signed for, Darnell Moore and Michael Arsenault. And so that kind of was also, Darnell Moore's was No Ashes in the Fire, and Michael Arsenault's was I Can't Date Jesus. And they both were like brilliant and great and funny, but I was like, now I need to do, I need to tell my story now. And I want to tell a story that's a little bit different with me growing up in the North and, growing up with a family that really, really affirmed me, and growing up with a family that really, really loved on me, even if we didn't have the right language to know what I was going through or what I was dealing with. Yeah. And so my book primarily talks about two things. One, what my experience was growing up as a Black queer kid, trying to figure out who I was without having the language to know exactly what I was going through. But the second thing is I allow people into my mind and into what I was thinking about. And I think that is what, in many ways, draws people into the book, is because you kind of get insight into like what I was actually processing. And it's not just the experience. It's literally like, but I was thinking in this moment these things, and I think that's what's been helping it to connect to so many queer people.
So it's funny because you write about your life like in this book, like as if they're events, and they are, right? They're like events. And so it's like I'm going through that experience with you. Like it's like I'm like walking through that moment with you, and I'm reading it. And so I have some favorite moments in that book. I don't like to spoil it, so I'm not gonna bring it up. But there are some moments, and I'll just say this: it has to do with cowboy boots. And I tell you that I nearly threw the book across the room and burst out laughing. It was like, because it goes in waves. Like you have some moments in there that are tear jerking, and then you have some moments that just make you want to like bust out laughing. And so I really appreciated you writing the book. I think there were so many things I connected like with as a Black gay man. I identify as gay, and who knows, that might change. I don't know.
Right.
It's gay. But like, can you tell me how and when you've become to identify as queer?
Identifying as queer was probably a few years ago. I actually wrote about it. So I'm trying to think, it had to be like maybe 2014 or 2015 when I started to kind of feel like what I was dealing with was like I know what gay is, but what I'm dealing with seemed a little bit more than that. Like I be having other thoughts and other processes going on and other feelings, and I'm like, I don't really know how to explain them yet. So for me, the identifier of just like saying I was queer made sense at that time. I think, I now identify as non-binary because I know that that's truly what I am and what I've always been. That identity, that choice to finally like really identify as that and use they, them pronouns came from a conversation that I had with my grandmother before she passed, and I talk about it in the next book in full detail, but the short of it is basically I was having a conversation with her while she was in the hospital. And she just literally looked at me and was like, "You're not just gay, right?" And I was like, well no. Like, I'm not just gay. She was like, okay. She was like, because you never really were a boy, but you never really were a girl. But you always were just like
It's so
something in
interesting
between
how our
those
like
two.
family members, you know, they attempt to communicate that, right? Like it's
Right.
like,
And and again, it was funny because like she brought up the conversation. Like it wasn't like I said something to her. Like she just
yeah,
out of nowhere just said it. And I was like, well, right. Like I do many times do feel like I sit in between what we know as a boy and a girl. And sometimes I don't feel like I'm either at all. So
yeah,
that conversation though is what led to me really understanding like, you know, I don't really fit into a box category wise, I think.
hmm
I think anyone who reads the book knows that my daydreams, I was a girl in my daydreams. Like I never was a boy. When I never thought about growing old as a boy or any, like I always thought about growing old as
yeah,
a girl.
yeah,
And just the way that my brain was like, just processes things. Like I processed through so many lenses. And so that's kind of what pushed me to like going into like, I guess like this territory of an identity that's always existed, but I guess not so publicly to where
yeah,
I can explain it to people and be able to talk about what it feels like when you don't really feel like you fit into like a box of a quote unquote gender, and why it's important that we don't continue to have like a society that's like built up on gender, propped up
yeah.
so much. So yeah.
Yeah, no, I mean, yeah, I mean, I've known you for I don't know how many years now, and like the book exposed a lot of things that I didn't even know about, but it also made me question like, you know, how I identify as gay. Like, is that really where I fall? You know, it was really something that made me think about evaluating that. I mean, thanks for sharing that experience in the book. I think like for people like you and I, that may be something to help them, you know, make those decisions or really, you know, understand what they might be experiencing. So thanks again. Um, in your memoir, you also touch on some traumatic experiences that occurred during your youth. And, you know, we are in a pandemic. Our youth are not in school. They're doing, you know, online learnings and things like that. But like as a youth, like how do you think you overcome or overcame those experiences?
Um, You know, it's funny. I guess as a youth, I didn't process them as trauma. Like I processed certain things as trauma as a youth, but some of those things that were traumatic, I didn't realize were traumatic until I was older. Because they were still playing a role in my life, and I didn't
Yeah,
realize how much of a role they were playing until I had to sit and interrogate. Like, well, why am I doing this in dating? Why am I doing this? Why do I tense up when like a guy comes up behind me? Even if I'm okay with a guy grabbing behind me, why do I tense up? Why do I? And I had to then process it back to, because when you were in the bathroom when you were 15, a boy walked up behind you and violated you. And that is exactly why when a guy or a gender nonconforming, whomever,
yeah,
tries to get that close to you, you automatically go there before you untense yourself. And so I think a lot of it was to process the trauma. I don't think I processed a lot of it as a kid, but I will say the traumas that I did process as a kid, it primarily was just rooted in, I just wanted to be safe. And so for me, it was like I didn't really have much of a choice of like there weren't many options. So it was just like safety was the only option back then. So it was like,
yeah,
well, what's the safest thing for me to be able to get out of this situation? And so anytime I had like a traumatic experience, if it didn't require me to physically fight my way out of it, which some of them did, then I just processed it as, well, what's the safest way I can get out of this? Even if it
yeah,
meant that I had to go along with the experience just to get out of the experience.
yeah,
And I think that that's something that a lot of us still do today. I think it's something that a lot of children do today. You kind of just like, you go along with it until you can get to that place of safety or get to that point of safety. I think safety is always at the forefront of our minds. And I think that we don't give kids enough credit for having to process adult level situations with brains that don't have full information and full development to even process those situations. But I do think that that was what was going on. I think I recognized what safety needed to look like for me at a very young age. And
yeah,
so I then used that as my lens to process any type of traumatic episode or event through. It was like, well, what's the safest route out of this? I think the older I got, though, safety was still a concern, but also like you also were just ready to defend yourself at any point, which also isn't necessarily healthy or good.
Yeah.
But I was also, and I mean, in many ways I still am, like, it's always like fight or flight.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm always processing things through that lens too, a lot of times, because I feel like as Black queer people, there really is no safety. And I've said this before, like, I don't think we're ever safe. I don't think anytime we're in our venues or in our parties where it's all us, I still don't think we're safe. Because if someone who hates us knows that we're all congregated there, how does that make us safe? If they get in and they want to harm us, they will harm us.
So it's actually interesting that you say that, because one of the things Whitman-Walker, does and participates in. So Whitman-Walker Health has like a youth mental health service. And so we provide individual group therapy for young people. And that age range is between like age 13 through age 24. And so we actually focus on trauma recovery, LGBTQ issues, and, if you have trouble identifying with that, and any other life challenges. So the services are free. They're available to young people who have experienced or witnessed any crimes or had any unfortunate experiences. The program is also, it provides a low barrier health support to maintain, a person's overall well-being. And so we strive to provide young people with a safe and affirming space to explore their, individual identities and their capacities for healing. So our therapists use like a ton of different techniques. It can be from art, music, or you can even do sand play in session if that is going to help you overcome your issue. But we tailor these sessions to like meet those young people's specific needs. And so just for our viewers, if you're interested in that, and you're in the Washington, D.C. area, you can email us at youthmentalhealth@whitman-walker.org. Or you can give us a call, and that number is 202-745-7000. And so, George, having those traumatic experiences, and it's so funny because I read your book, and it brought up some things that occurred in my life as a kid. And I was like, oh, I need to talk to George. I'm not bringing those up right now. I was like, but I need to talk to you offline about some of that, because I could relate to some of those traumatic experiences. And so it's good that, Whitman-Walker has something that helps, kids like us, because I didn't know of anything like that when I was going through some of that stuff. So I do want to come back to because you made a post on Twitter about your gender identity, which was news to me. I was like, oh, wow. But I want to know a little bit more about your journey, since you've made that announcement, we'll call it, but you've known that all your life, but it's new to a lot of people who are around you, right? And so can you tell us how you got to that point a little bit more? Also, how have people, been receiving that? But also, let us know why gender identity is so important.
Yeah, how I got to that point. Again, it's like when you grow up, I always grew up knowing I was different. So, I always grew up processing that I was different, but not having the language. And so then what life literally became for me was, okay, I'm going to take this journey, but the journey is realistically to find the language to identify, to say who I am to myself. The journey is really so that when I wake up in the mirror every day, I don't have to look at myself and feel like I'm not in the right space, or I don't have the right words to be able to tell people what I feel, how I feel, what's going on inside of me. To tell people that when you see me, just don't assume that this is who I am. Don't assume that I am man. Don't assume that I am this. Don't assume that I am that. But ask me, talk to me, get to learn who I am before you already make these assumptions about what it is that you think that I am, right?
Exactly.
And so the journey then became, honestly, it was like, okay, well, for safety reasons, I gotta at least pretend to be heterosexual. So it was like you pretended until you couldn't pretend anymore. So then it was like, okay, well, gay seems to fit because that's what everybody who looks like me is, so I'll be that. Then that didn't seem to fit because I wanted to do other things that it seemed like most gays or the gay box couldn't contain. And so then for me, it was like, all right, well, if this box can't contain me, then maybe I need to think about this differently. Maybe
Yeah.
I'm thinking about I need to be in a box when I don't exist in a box.
Yeah.
And so that was then what pushed me even further to be like, let me start researching identity. Let me start looking at trans identities and non-binary and gender non-conforming and like these other terms that exist already, but we just have been afraid to use or afraid to talk about or afraid to discuss in this way.
I think you said something when you first got started on this topic, and you were like, you know, get to know me before you start assuming of like who I am. And even as a gay man myself, I still have to unlearn that. You know, I have to like stop assuming people's pronouns and like get to know them or be open and ask them like what that is, you know.
Right.
And so like that's something I am continuously practicing being better at. And I'm noticing now, even out of respect and care for you, like I knew George as he for a long time, and so now I have to reprogram myself to make sure I communicate your pronouns as you are. And so like people need to do that. And it's
but I
important.
knew George as he for 34 years. So there isn't, and that's why I said it even when I said the statement. Like I just ask you to respect it. I don't expect you to get it right all the time because I still don't get it right because I have only known me as that for 30 something years. I also am having to unlearn, and I am also having to do those same things on myself. So
yeah,
I can't have, in my opinion, I can't have bigger expectations of people than I place on myself during this time because I'm still on the journey and I'm still, you know, trying to figure it all out. Myself in many ways. I will say though, I think it's important that I name that one of the fears that I've always had about identifying this way, there were two. It was one, like family backlash, like family having to defend me in that way and like having to like explain to people like, these are, you know, George's pronouns, this is how they want to be referred to as, you know, all of that. Was one fear, but the other fear was the fact that I still exist in LGBTQ community, which is still going to be dominated by cis gay men. I primarily exist in Black LGBTQ community, so our community is still dominated though by cis gay men. That is our largest population of the umbrella is primarily cis gay men, and there are a lot of times where cis gay men have a very, very hard time. I mean, we already deal with the issues around femme. We already deal with the issues around fatness. You didn't add trans identities. You didn't add gender nonconforming. You didn't add like a butch queen, like just terminology that the girls just can't take. And you know, now somebody who looks like me is saying, well, I'm non-binary to people who have always known me as this thing, this he. But then a whole new audience of people who may be attracted to me or want to get to know me or whatever, but then they're also like fearful of like, well, they don't operate the same way, and I'm used to only dealing with people that identify as men and they don't identify as a man. So if I'm not having sex with a man, then what does that make me? And so it's like, it opens up a whole new can of worms for those people. And so there was a little bit of a fear of rejection from them, but I just had to like realize like, you know, that fear of rejection couldn't outweigh me finally needing to be myself. And I will say for the most part, there hasn't been any like mass exodus or like,
that's good.
You know, anybody talking slick. I'm sure at some point I have to deal with my fraternity, but I mean,
it is what it is.
I've been like the most vocal one of us for like the past couple years anyway. So, you know, it's another thing that they're going to have to deal with at some point. So.
Yeah, so I do want to say, regardless of how you identify, it is important that you get the respectful and dignifying care that you need and deserve. So finding quality, safe, and stigma-free healthcare can be challenging if you're like George or myself. So Whitman-Walker team members are here to support you. We have gender affirming services. We will help you reach your specific healthcare goals. If you have any questions about gender affirming services or you need assistance, you can give us a call at 202-797-4457. We are always striving to provide a safe, respectful, and affirming environment for our patients. And um, again, we provide medical, behavioral health, and other supportive services. So, all right, next topic. So, George,
Mm-hmm.
I think this was the one of the things that made me a little jealous of you from your book. And it was the connection with your family.
Yeah.
Like I would, I have a very supportive family, but I don't have a real solid bond with them. It was like, you had both, and it was like I just thought, I was like, oh, he's extremely lucky, to have that support system, to be able to go through all these experiences that you're having, and still, feel that support from your family. Not all LGBTQ plus people have those same experiences with family, and some of us can't even go to our biological families. We have to find those chosen families that we've
Right.
built over time to support us. And so is there any advice that you could provide to young LGBTQ plus people who might not be in those ideal family situations? Like, what do you think about that?
Yeah, I mean, I always say like chosen family is like an amazing concept, an amazing
They're life saving.
that we built. I think like people know like the ballroom community is built on that type of like familial creation of a family where there may not be a family for people like us. And in many ways, the fraternity and sororities are that too. Like there are many people who come into the organization who don't have family. And they come into those organizations literally seeking like brotherhood or sisterhood or some form of familiarity or some form of family. And I think those type of organizations have also done really, really well to cultivate those type of environments.
Yeah.
I always say to youth though that it's not easy. Like and I was one of you, so I totally understand what it was like. I was fortunate because I grew up in a family that affirmed me, and grew up in a family that still I talk to every day. We have family group chat, so I see them. I've seen them the last 4 weekends. Like, I'm always with my family. My family's involved in everything that I do, but everybody isn't fortunate enough to have that. But what I do say to people who aren't fortunate enough is to like find your family, and your family could be the family of your best friend. I also do. I see often where the parents have an issue with the child, but there's usually an aunt. There's usually an
That's
aunt.
true.
I'm gonna be very, very specific. There's usually an aunt that recognizes it and doesn't have an issue and usually picks up the slack of whatever the parents are doing to reject the child. I've seen that happen. It seems. I can't name a percentage. I'll just say a high percentage of times I am reached. The people who reach out to me the most are aunts of nephews who say that them and their nephew are reading the book, or that they have taken their nephew under their wing because the parents don't understand, or those type of things. So I always say, like, if there is a family member who does listen to you and does affirm you, then to lean into that family member. I think sometimes we don't feel like it's okay to do that, or sometimes we may be nervous to do that. But if there is somebody who is pouring into you, allow them to pour into you, but also be able to receive that and be able to then vocalize that you're needing of them as your family. And then when you get into like creative family, I say it all the time, like your friends are your family. And so if you really, really do have a great core group of friends, like really, really lean into your friends and really, really love on your friends. I mean, I lean heavily on my friends. I have a few friend circles, and I lean very, very heavily on my friends as a public figure to make it through a lot of the things that I have to go through, even till today, even with having a family, right? So know that your friends are your family and start to cultivate relationships that your friends become your family.
Exactly. So I know, like I have a best friend I've had for over probably 18 years now. And his family's like my family. My family's like his family. But I know that there were moments where he was out to his mom and I wasn't out to my mom. And so I would spend more time at, his house because it was like my safe haven. It was a place where I could be me without question. And so I remember being able to have that experience. So I definitely agree. Like, you know, if you have a best friend, you know, find those who are pouring into you. And I'm still cool with his mom. Like, you know, she lives across the country, but, you know, we stay connected via social media. And when we are in the same place, it's like still like our old time. So, you know, find your chosen family, whether that's the ballroom scene. I've actually done a little bit of that back in my day too. Ballroom scene, you know, there's community organizations that you can join for youth. And speaking of that, Whitman-Walker has, you know, youth and family support services. So at Whitman-Walker, you know, we do offer free education, prevention, health, and social programs that are tailored to youth and their families. And so our programs are, again, designed to create a safe space. We want all youth to feel respected and welcome, and of course, to be able to be themselves. So our youth services, again, we care about education, prevention, and making sure that, you know, that the youth understands their.
I'm laughing. So the person who just commented, her name is JJ Dynamite. That is my, I guess I don't want to say that's the longest friend that I have. We met in kindergarten. Her name is Janet Johnson. We met in kindergarten, and we both lived in Plainfield. And of course, we sat behind each other because our last names were Johnson. And so,
Yeah.
But we also went to high school together. Like, she went to a different middle school. We also went to high school together. But I've known her for 30 years. And so that's the longest friendship that I have. But suffice to say, you build family with people like that.
Yeah, exactly.
Who still hear commenting and all
Absolutely.
these years later. Yeah.
Yeah. And then we got some other comments here. Say our friends started a book club and we have been reading your book. You're such a gem. Thank you for the book. It's helpful. It's helped us and have such important conversations But yeah, again, Whitman-Walker, we have those youth services. You know, if you want to bring your family there, we can help educate. But we also help you like with HIV, STI, pregnancy testing. You know, we can share lessons on safer sex. We actually have a group that's dedicated to a program that's dedicated to youth. It's actually called Real Talk DC. And so Real Talk DC connects you to free health services. Also, it's a space for you to express yourself. So if you want to, you can follow us on Facebook and Twitter at Real Talk DC. You can also follow us on Instagram at Real Talk DC _. So, dang, George, we're almost at the end though. I was like, I want to know so much more. So is there anything else you want to share with your viewers? And look at everybody like, I got 26 minutes left on the Audible.
No, I saw Mercy said she only had 10 pages left. Yes, I will be doing a book tour at some point when it's safe to go back outside. I mean, there was one plan clearly, but all of this happened. So I guess I can't say that yet. But yes, I will be doing a book tour next year because there are some more things planned with this book. So there are some more announcements that'll be coming out soon about some other things we're doing with the book. So yes, a book tour next year. So I will be out. I'm working on the next book, which is also going to focus more on my family again, but it'll be primarily the stories about myself, my little brother, and my two older cousins who were raised by my grandmother. So we had our parents there and stuff, but my grandmother still did the majority of the raising because she was raising all of us, including them. So, but that book will be out, scheduled to be out September of 2021.
Okay.
And so I'm really, really excited about that. I'm trying to think if I got anything else going on. I have a lot going on I just can't talk about. The TV show stuff is in development. So me and Gabrielle Union are actively working on finding a home for the TV show, which is going to focus on my college years at this point. So, you know, to be a HBCU situation.
Yeah.
So I'm excited about that.
I'm so excited to you know, I can't wait to see some of these stories like on screen
and kind of played out. And
there was also a second favorite in the book, your relationship with your brother, like how he like protect you. And it's so interesting because I have a younger brother who played that same role. Like he was, even though I'm like older, and I would protect him from people that were like bigger than him, right? But he protected me more so from everybody who had these gay accusations, but
Yeah,
like,
all that
because
type
for a
of
long
stuff.
time I was like, I'm not gay, but I was gay. And so when you, like, in the book you mentioned that, I was like, oh my God, like, that reminds me exactly of my relationship with my brother. I mean, people need to definitely read this book. It's so easy to, you know, relate to. You know, I really feel like it connects to youth experiences. And so, which is why I wanted to bring you here with Whitman-Walker, to let our viewers, as well as your viewers, know about us, but our viewers to know about you, that this book is here, that it can help, you know, expose some light on, you know, some of the experiences that you might be experiencing. It's very funny because I have some friends who, you know, aren't sure where they fall on the spectrum, right? And so I was like, you know, you should read this book. Read this book, you know, it's totally normal. Like, this is what life is about. Figure it out. And like, you're not gonna know it like the next day, but
No.
like, that's what it's about. Like, you can move along that spectrum, you know, as long as you're comfortable and happy. But yeah, anything else, George?
Anything else? You know, the country's in a time of like civil unrest, and you know, I think it's important that we understand like what's at stake and what we're dealing with right now. But the one thing that I always like to share with people is that it's important to be engaged in your community and be engaged
Absolutely.
in community-based organizations, and to understand that in many ways we have the power to correct and fix some of the problems and issues in society that we deal with that we think that politicians are going to do. And so I just encourage people that while we're seeing so many people energized, to also use that energy to build the things that we need. And so I guess like the best way to say it is like, if you see that your city has an issue with homelessness, rather than thinking that some city official is ever going to do that job, sometimes it's on us to make sure that these people eat. Sometimes it's on us to make sure that these people who are experiencing homelessness have shelter, and to start processing like every situation through life like that. So like, when you see a problem, try to fix the problem instead of trying to put it on someone else that we know ain't gonna do it to do it. So I just encourage us to, you know, be the change that we want to see.
I actually want to add to that, because I had this conversation with a group of men a few weeks ago, and you know, I was like, you know, activism can look so many ways. It can be, you know, writing a book, you know, to share your experiences. It can be going out and protest. It could be whatever, but as long as you're like contributing in your own ways, you know what I mean? Like, that's important. And so don't feel like you have to do what everybody else is doing. Do it your own way, but just as long as you show a way to, like, you know, show a voice. If there's, you know, any adverse things happen to people, please speak up. Please speak up. And so I'm glad you shared your book. It's so easy to pick this up and give it to parents who may not be understanding what their kids are experiencing, or their kids are too young to communicate it, you know, themselves. So I'm so happy you did this. I'm sure it's going to be a help to a lot of parents and youth. So thanks, George.
Yes. Like I said, the book, honestly, like the book, and I think that's the main purpose of the book, though, right? Like, the book was about like, I am somebody who, I consider myself an abolitionist, and I think a lot of people who hear about like abolition, especially now, they just think about like prisons, right? Like that's where we see it the most. But for me, it's a little bit deep. Well, it's a lot deeper than that, right? And so it's like, gender's a construct that I need to abolish, because that's the construct that harmed me the most growing up, primarily, right? That was, I won't say harmed me the most, but that was the one that really placed a lot of trauma and a lot of harm in my way. And a lot of harm in all Black queer people's way, was these whole constructs that we had to fit these things. And so I think the book does that, starts to do that work, because it's creating this conversation around making people who, like you said yourself, identify as gay, have to take a step back to say, wait, am I really just that? Like, wait, I've never really had to think through that, because that was just, that was the that was the thing, that was the box, that was
it was the box.
that was what I was told,
like,
right?
it was just like,
men like you, y'all gay. And it's like, until something else comes along, and then you like, wait a minute, I got to think through this stuff, right? And so I think that's the world I want to live in is, and I hope that this book is like the catalyst, because that's the start of my conversations that I want to give to the world is, you know, this unlearning of everything that we thought we knew, and reaching that step further and going that step deeper, to abolishing the ways that we have had to think that we've had to navigate society, and that we've had to kind of like, you have to look a certain way, you have to be a certain way, this has to be acceptable, this is unacceptable. Yeah. When, like I always say, being a Negro has never been acceptable or respectable globally. So for us to try and contort ourselves to be a thing will never be respected, because the bodies that we exist in have never been respected, right? Yeah. And so my whole goal and purpose with this book was to teach people to unlearn those things and to like abolish those, all of those things that were indoctrinated in us, and for us to become like that blueprint generation for what it looks like to not just be the change that you want to see, but also like really live this thing and live that change, right? And
exactly,
like,
that's the slogan.
Yeah, like I'm just tired of, I'm really like tired of existing. I'm tired of Black people only being able to exist. And I want us to live, and I want gender abolition. I want all of those constructs, right? Like, I don't want you to tell me that clothes have a gender. I don't want you to tell me that colors, which is why the book is called All Boys Aren't Blue. Like, colors don't have gender. And you're not going to keep telling me that colors have gender. You're not going to keep telling me that these things have a thing that are attached to them that make no sense. And so that, I think, is the ultimate goal and the ultimate lesson. Even when, or bathrooms, right? Like, having a gender, right? Like, we all gotta go to the bathroom, right? Yeah. And so I think for me, honestly though, like, my life's work is to abolish those things. And even when we talk about, you know, y'all are Whitman-Walker Health. So when you talk about healthcare and you talk about like, you know what I'm saying? Like,
it's a lot of, I get you. No, like, it's a lot of things and constructs that need to be reconstructed or gone away with altogether. But our time we're coming in at the end of our time. You know, I can talk to you forever.
Yes.
We've done it. But I do want to say, remember to follow us on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter. You can follow Whitman-Walker at Whitman-Walker. You can also check out our website at whitmanwalker.org for the most up-to-date information and resources and services that we provide. Again, we are offering COVID-19 resources, so please give us a call if you need those at 202-797-4439. Also, don't forget to follow George at I am GM Johnson on Instagram and Twitter, and then follow me at my personal account at Sir_Dave_. Again, George, thank you for being here. Love your book. I hope people who are watching and haven't gotten it get it, and I cannot wait to see all your upcoming work.
Me either, because I got to write it.
All right, George, I will catch up.
All right.
Love you and talk to you later.
Love you too. Bye.
Bye.